the format of the presentation that I put together will start with just a very brief overview of the work we do at UH Press and how we work with journal editors and sponsors to publish content in the various journals that we work with. Some of the basic information I'll be providing includes, how to prepare your manuscript, how to think about selecting a publication, what the submission process and workflow looks like, the editorial workflow, and then a brief overview of the production workflow. So here at UH Press, we currently publish or distribute about 26 journals. They're both subscription-based and open access journals, and we publish these in cooperation with many different editorial offices, some units here at the university and some outside organizations. So each editorial office selects the content for their journal, and while we do focus on Pacific and Asian studies for the major part of our list, we work with a wide variety of editorial operations that include the Asian Pacific Island Nursing Journal, to Ocean Linguistics, to a literary journal, Manoa. And a couple of our journals that we work with have been in publication for nearly 70 years. And in fact, in next year, Pacific Science will have its 75th publication year celebration. So what our department handles mainly here on our side is the production process once the editorial process has been completed as far as reviewing and selecting the content. We support the editorial office's efforts by providing them, financial management, warehousing, marketing, subscription management, online submission systems, and we work with various copy editors and proofreaders to finalize the content before publication. And we also work with our partners to provide the widest distribution for content. And some of those providers I'm sure you're familiar with: Project Muse, JSTOR, BioOne, ScholarSpace, and Digital Commons. And one of the other priorities we have is making sure that the metadata for all this content gets put out into the various indexing and abstracting sources. For example, our open access journals, we want to make sure that they are indexed and the metadata is sent out to the Directory of Open Access Journals. And for the nursing journal, that includes PubMed as well. So now you've completed your research and you're ready to begin thinking about where you would like to submit it for publication. And depending upon your subject area, you can have a wide variety of choices. For example, the STM, the medical and economic and computer science areas, a lot of them use the preprint servers, and bioRxiveX is one example of that. But one thing to keep in mind is that the preprints are not the final published material. These are the manuscripts that are posted online immediately, available to the scientific community. And so you can receive feedback on these draft manuscripts before you actually refine them and submit them to journals. So these are not peer-reviewed, edited, or typeset before they're put online. And once they're posted on one of these preprint servers, the articles are citable, and so they cannot be removed. Some of the different types of publications include society-affiliated journals, and these can be subscription-based or they can be open access journals. There's also the hybrid option, which sometimes is called author's choice. And for that option, it's basically a subscription-based publication, but it also offers the option that if an author wants their content immediately available open access, they can pay a author processing charge, and then once the article is published, it's made available freely online. And some things to keep in mind also are that some society open access journals don't even charge author processing charges. They have no charges. And those society journals basically fund that journal fully so that there are no fees to authors. For open access journals, one thing you should be very aware of is the Creative Commons license that that particular journal uses. And so you should get familiar with the licenses and be comfortable with those licenses when you sign your publication. So as you're thinking about publishing or where you want to publish your manuscript, and you're thinking about an open access journal, you want to think about the Creative Commons license and what Creative Commons license that journal uses. So as an author, you want to review the license and be comfortable with that license. The CC BY license is the most accommodating license offered. And this allows others to distribute, remix, tweak, build upon your work, and even use it commercially, as long as they credit you for the original creation. The attribution share alike, the CC BY SA, that's the one that Wikipedia uses. So they can credit you and license their new creations under these identical terms. The most restrictive of the licenses is the attribution, non-commercial, and no derivatives. And this license allows others to download your work and share them with others as long as they credit you, but they cannot change them, nor can they sell them commercially. And there is one other, there's the public domain. And for that, that's material that is free of known copyright around the world. And these are typically very old works. But your main focus is what audience do you want to reach with your material? And so as you start to look at journals and investigate them, you want to make sure that you carefully review the aims and scope of that journal to make sure that your manuscript is going to be fitting within that very well, because that is a very critical piece of the publication puzzle, as the #1 reason that manuscripts will be rejected is because it doesn't fit within the aims and scope of the journal. So you need to think about also, schedule, how quickly to time can that journal publish material once it's accepted, and look at expected timelines from acceptance to publication. You only want to choose one journal to submit to. You don't want to do multiple submissions, as those are not really looked upon very friendly. And as you're looking at journals, you want to be very careful about predatory journals and publishers. It's truly frightening how rampant these are becoming. We've had several instances where we've had, people impersonating editors of our journals. We've seen our journals on other websites where they've asked for submissions. And so it's an ongoing problem. So as you're looking at the journal, make sure you look at the reputation of that publisher and the journal. Review their author guidelines and submission process. And make sure that you can find their contact listing for publisher staff, for editorial policies and contacts, and links to published content. So before you do your submission, just do a general web search to make sure this is a legitimate website. Because these predatory journals and publishers, they exist primarily to extract fees from authors and use a wide variety of methods to do it. Not just websites, but they've sent emails out to people where they've impersonated an editor asking to submit to an email address. And so you want to be careful when you get an email to review and confirm that the person is who they say they are. So once you've looked at the journal, then you've found the perfect journal, the aims and the scope are exactly what you're looking for. Their time to acceptance, the publication is something that looks good for you. I know sometimes we have people that are in a very big time crunch because they have to get it done by a certain date in order, to meet their committee meetings or promotion meetings. So you need to plan far in advance of that. It's also important to look at the submission process, and if that particular journal does handle copy editing and proofreading, because not all journals will provide that service. And then there are other.
Sorry, it looks like there's a notification window popped up in the corner of the presentation.
Ah, I see.
Sorry, thank you.
So there are other publishing models too. Instead of complete issues being published at one time, there's early release publishing, which is generally offered if you want to have your article posted as the manuscript, or there's early release publishing where they do the copy editing and then post it. And then once the complete issue is actually all put together, the early release postings come off and the full issue goes up online with the fully copy edited, proofread, and composed manuscript. So there are some different alternatives that help to speed up the publication process and get your article online sooner. And then, as I mentioned before, if it's an open access journal, when you're looking at the publication agreement, take a look at the Creative Commons license that they're using and make sure that you're comfortable with that license. There are some open access journals that will actually let you choose what license you want to use. And another important consideration is to look at what fees that this journal charges. Do they charge submission fees, color printing fees, page charges? Do they charge for an extra fee if your manuscript goes over a certain word limit? Because these are all common practices in various different types of publications. So once you've selected your journal and you've taken a good look at the author guidelines and the style sheet, you want to follow those submission instructions for formatting your manuscript. And there are even some journals that require you to use their own journal template. So you want to take a look at that as well. And then as you're preparing for your submission, to compile all the various components of your article, which include your title, abstract, keywords. In some instances, you'll have a conflict of interest statement, funding sources, acknowledgements, and then formatting references is very important as well. And of course, if you have images, figures, table, you want to make sure that you have any permissions that you need to obtain and that you have good quality images. And one other item you might want to think about at this time is registering for an ORCID ID. And if you're not familiar, it's the persistent digital identifier that you own and control, and it connects all your professional information, affiliation, grants, and publications, and all of that together so that you can share the information with other systems. Many submission systems now actually allow you to put your ORCID ID in there, so it automatically generates the metadata to make sure you get recognition. So with the huge amount of content on the web, you want to make sure that you're optimizing your article for online search. It's an important consideration, and you want to be sure that when someone's doing a search, your article pops up right away. And your title, abstract, and keywords are all part of the metadata that the search engine uses to categorize your content. And it's also the metadata that's supplied to all the major indexing services, such as Directory of Open Access, PubMed, Scopus. So it's important to consider this, and the next few slides will help with that. So your abstract is an important part of your article because it's often the freely available part of an article, especially for subscription-based journals. And you want to make sure you review the author guidelines before you finalize your abstract, because some journals have specific word limits, and depending on the type of research that you're publishing, you may have a descriptive abstract or a structured abstract or a graphical abstract. The most common types of abstracts that you'll find are descriptive and informative, but many medical journals use structured abstracts as well. And this is just a a plug for an article that is really nice. It underlies, how you can write a strong abstract and things to think about as you're writing your abstract. What's the central issue or question that is driving your inquiry? What is your answer to this, or how do you solve that problem, and what steps did you take to get to that answer? And then how does your article contribute to an existing scholarly conversation? So as you're writing your abstract, you want to make sure that you're using your words consistently. What we've seen in some instances is an author may use a hyphenated word in some places and it's not hyphenated in others, or he's using different words that have a similar meaning, when you want to keep consistency throughout your article. So the abstracts and the keywords and phrases, those allow for the easy searching, and it's important that they're consistent so that the higher up it will become in your search on Google or Google Scholar or wherever people are searching. So the abstract, as I said, is the first section of your paper that journal editors and reviewers will read as well, and it's often the title, abstract, and keywords that are the only parts that are freely available online if it's in a subscription-based journal. So as you're writing your abstract, think about, what would you be searching for if you were looking for an article on this topic? And we're now come to the references components of your article, and this is another area you want to make sure you're following the journal style, and so make sure you look at the guidelines and the style sheet. You can even look at a recent issue. For an example, I wouldn't go to an older issue because styles do change over time, and so you want to make sure you have the most recent. And an important component of references now is, of course, linking those references, which means formatting the DOI, if you have the DOI in the citation, and if it's not, then making sure you provide a URL to the material that you're citing. And of course, endnotes and footnotes is another component to look at. A lot of journals now have endnotes instead of footnotes, so it's important that you look at the submission and author guidelines to follow their instructions. And as you're thinking about what images and graphics to use, it's important not to overdo it, because you want to make sure the images actually emphasize important information about the article. And it can also provide alternative presentation for information. And it's just particularly helpful for visual learners. And the images should complement and simplify explanations in the main text. For online-only journals, the quality doesn't have to be 300 dpi, but for journals that do still handle the print component, it's important that you have a minimum 300 dpi for print resolution. And you want to be sure that you provide good image captions so the reader will have a context for the image and explain what it illustrates, and provide a proper attribution. And if the figure is adapted or reprinted from another publication, you'll want to make sure that you have the proper permissions for that. And another aspect, which I mentioned before, is that if you're wanting to use color images, then there may be a fee for that, if that journal charges a fee for color printing. As I touched on earlier, permissions are an important aspect when you're using material that has been published in other publications, or that is intellectual property owned by someone else. We've had some instances where an author thinks because they find it online, they can include it, but that's not usually the case. Usually you have to have some kind of permission from that. Even for Google, they have specific guidelines, for how to use, for example, images from their maps. So you need to provide proper attribution for those. And as you look at your author agreements, you want to make sure you understand and confirm any information in there where they have stipulated that you have all the permissions for the material that you're using in your manuscript. Some publishers may also provide you a template for permissions if you need to go out and seek permissions. So once you have selected your journal and you've prepared your manuscript according to the author guidelines and the style sheet, you're ready to submit it online. This is an example of one submission system. This is through the Kahualike site here at UH, and is a digital commons submission system. And this one actually helps the author in listing, the materials they need to get together before they submit. Another type of submission system, this is EJ Press submission system, which is used by many publishers. There are a wide variety of submission systems out there. Once you've submitted your article and your manuscript, it goes into the editorial review process, and the peer review, depending on the journal, can be single blind, double blind, or now they have open review online. But generally what the journal editors and the peer reviewers are looking for are, is the writing clear and understandable? Are the results set in the context of other known research? What does your research add to the field? What is unique about it? And then most manuscripts now go through a plagiarism software checking system. And as you submit your manuscript, it will go into the editorial workflow, and either the editor or an editorial assistant will be the first reviewer of information to look and make sure that all the pieces have been submitted and that it looks like the manuscript fits within the scope of the journal. If both of those items are acceptable, then generally it would go to the editor for assignment to peer reviewers. And once the editor has received the peer review reports, the editor then compiles those reports together and provides an email to the author explaining whether their decision was accepted with major revisions, accepted with minor revisions, or if it's rejected. And you should carefully review all the comments from the editor and the reviewers and respond to any queries, provide further explanation if they have asked for that. And if you feel they've misunderstood something, you should feel free to respond and explain, where the discrepancies are and what was meant that they have misunderstood. So those are all important parts of the peer review process. This is a workflow chart, an example editorial workflow that shows kind of the email sent to acknowledge that your submission has been received and that it's deemed appropriate for the journal. It comes out for review, and then the peer review feedback on your manuscript is then put into the system, and once it's accepted, you will be given a publication agreement and also likely a schedule about the timing and scheduling of your manuscript into an issue of the journal. So once the editorial workflow has completed and the editor has compiled the manuscripts that are going to go into an issue of the journal, that's generally where the production side starts, and that's where our team kind of gets involved. So we are provided with all the materials for that issue, and then we review those materials, we review any image files, and you may get some emails from production staff at that point asking for either new images or a query from the copy editor. Generally, there are two instances throughout the production process where authors are involved, and that's generally during the copy editing phase. Then copy editor may have queries that they'll reach out to you to confirm and clear up. And then once the copy editing is completed and the first proofs are ready, that means it's been copy edited, it's been put into the template of the journal, images are placed, it's completely laid out. Then those will go back to the author for a final approval. And this is a time where if you find typos or small corrections, we can make those corrections. But generally, there are no, large changes in material or content at this point, because we're looking at deadlines and production workflow to keep the journal on schedule. One other item I wanted to mention is accessibility, and that's something we've been working on the past 2 years here. So I've included this slide to actually help bring awareness to how you can make documents accessible when you're working in Microsoft Office. We want to make sure that, we can assist people with disabilities, and that screen reading software and alternate keyboards can access the information that we're publishing and distributing. So now that your article has been published in the journal, it goes out, we start the marketing process here through our social media and our blogs, but there's also a lot that authors can do to help discoverability. And so this is just kind of a short list of things you might be able to do. Link to the abstract and article from your Facebook. Of course, share your links on Twitter and other social media. Update your professional profile to reflect your new publication. And Kudos is another system that authors can use to help disseminate the material for their article. And it helps publish descriptions of research for non-specialists. And so as you think about creating a publication plan to support your career objectives and expand your knowledge and expertise, you can feel free to join the next webinar on publishing beyond grad school and professional development. And I'm ready to take any questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Pam. Really appreciate all that information. Okay, so we have a few questions so far. First question is, will participants be receiving a copy of the PowerPoint? So ideally what we would like to do is, because the presentation is part of the recording, when we distribute the recording, again, if the quality is good, you'll be able to see the PowerPoint presentation along with the verbal presentation as well. So that would be our plan. If you would like a copy of the PowerPoint directly in addition to the recording, you can contact us at GD Events and then we'll correspond with you. The next question we have is there an education research journal within UH?
There is educational perspectives. That journal, we here at the press don't handle that journal, but it's out of, I think, the business school. I'm not sure.
Okay. Next question is, can you explain a little bit more about ORCID ID?
Yeah, so ORCID is a system that allows authors to sign up, and then you're assigned a ORCID ID. And so if you sign up for this ORCID ID and use that ID every time you publish, all your materials are linked together through that ORCID ID site. And you may find when you do searches in databases, a lot of times you can see where the author name is. There will be a graphic image that has an ID, I think, in it, and you can click on that, and that's their ORCID ID and links directly to the ORCID ID system, and then you can see all of that author's material that they've published. But it's a way that all your research can be directly linked to you, and there's no room for error. It won't be linked, mistakenly to somebody else who might have the same name, because this digital identifier is what differentiates you.
Okay. The next question is kind of a long question. Are there any precautions of submitting to preprint in case I'm planning to send the manuscripts to journals later? I assume the copyright would still stay with the author, but how is it considered in preprint? I guess the question is really about copywriting and preprint.
Yeah, so preprint servers are common, like I said, in the science, technology, economic, and medicine fields. And so a lot of the journals in those fields will accept your manuscript, even though you have published it on a preprint server. That is an important distinction, though, you might want to make with the journal that you want to publish, and to make sure they do accept manuscripts that have been posted on preprint servers. Because the manuscripts on the preprint server are not, they've not been through the copy editing and proofreading and peer review process. These are the raw manuscripts submitted by the authors. But they are available online. So you want to check with your journal to make sure they accept. But most journals in the STEM fields are familiar with that and accept those.
Thank you. Going back to ORCID, Pam, did you have some resources, some URLs available? I think one of them was for ORCID, and you had mentioned Kudos. There we go.
Yeah, so here we go.
No. So I know some people were wondering about some of these. So here are some of the websites you could go to for that.
Right, yeah. So the last two pieces of my slide here are more information on predatory journals, Scholar-Space, the press, but also direct links to ORCID, Kudos, FundRef for the funding registry, creating accessible documents. And the Manuscript Exchange is a new system. It's a partnership of 3 different publishers where you can submit one time, but it's evaluated for inclusion to 15 different journals. So it's something brand new that they're trying.
And speaking of predatory journals, Pam, can you just kind of highlight some of the things again that would be the red flags that, oh, this is probably a predatory journal?
Yes. So one example is there are websites out there. They're very nicely done. They look very professional, and they have all these journals on there. And then they ask you to submit a manuscript. So, for example, I found one of our journals, the Journal of World History, on this site. But one thing I noticed is the information they have on the journal is old. The current editor listed there, that's not the current editor. So you want to, if you go to a site and you think, this is great, I would do a search for that journal. What other sites come up? And you can see, I think, right away that, number one, if there's no link to the journal content on that site, then that would be one red flag. Doing a search on the editor and confirming that that is the current editor of the journal would be another important point. Making sure the contact listing for the publisher, if there's nobody there you can get a hold of at the publisher, that would be questionable to me. And of course, editor contacts most definitely. Another very popular scam is to send emails out. So we've seen this happen with one of our other journals, is somebody got an email from someone saying they were the editor and would you please submit your paper, but this person happened to know that the person listed as editor on the email was not the editor. So they contacted us and we contacted Google because they were using a Gmail account to make them aware of the fraud. But, these are things that seem to be happening more and more often.
Thank you. Next question is, what are the reasons for not submitting to multiple journals?
So the main reason is because of the peer review that gets done. So what happens is you submit your manuscript on this specific topic. So the journal editors look at your manuscript and who in that field is best to comment, to review that. And so they contact that peer reviewer. They spend their time reviewing that manuscript and providing feedback on that manuscript. And it's not just one reviewer, but generally 2 reviewers are doing that to provide you that information. And if you simultaneously submitted this to a number of journals, it's very possible that you're going to have a peer reviewer get contacted by more than one journal. And then, it's because the peer review process takes time and energy and, it's just, overloaded the way it is. And to have it simultaneously, then when those journals find out, they may not accept it for publication.
Okay. And if a journal rejects your article, would it be appropriate to send it to a different journal at that time?
Yes, you can do that. You can, if it rejects it outright, you can definitely submit it to whatever other journal you want to. If it's been through the peer review and you have feedback and it's rejected, you could address that feedback and ask the editor if he wants to, reevaluate it. Or once you've revised your manuscript, you can submit it to another journal.
So along those lines, Pam, is that the point at which you should submit to another journal, is when it gets rejected? Or are there any indicators prior to that it's now at a phase where it's okay to submit to another publication?
Sure. Yes, if your manuscript is rejected by a publisher, you're free to submit it to whoever else you would like to. If you have submitted it to a journal and you've not heard anything from that journal for 6 months and you're sending them an email asking them about status and you're not getting an answer, then I would say that you're free to submit that as well. But it's important when you evaluate journals to take a look at their timeline for peer review and acceptance, because journals vary widely. We have journals that publish only once a year. We have journals that publish quarterly. Some journals are very up to date on where their manuscripts are, and so you can generally be published within a year. Some journals get so much material that even with the rejections and everything else, they still are working on issues that are 1.5 years, 2 years out. But they should be able to tell you, as the author, when to expect your article to be published.
Okay, thank you. What are the reasons to submit preprint, for example, on sorry, I'm not going to say this correctly, Arziv or Stemfield?
So preprints just allow your research to get out there very quickly. And it also allows feedback on that research. So people can give you feedback on your draft that is posted to the preprint server. Those are the main reasons why preprints are used in those fields, because it's, very fast, public out there very quickly, and you can get feedback very quickly.
what would you estimate for a range of costs involved with publishing in a journal?
Those can vary greatly. So for open access fees, I mean, they can vary from $4,000, down to $250, depending on the journal. Color fees, some journals may not charge for that. Other journals may. We charge a very small flat fee for color in our articles. It ranges around $250 to $300 for color images in the print issue. What we do have in all of our journals really is we provide color images online, even if the print is black and white. So we will have both black and white and color versions of the same article. Other types of fees, page charges used to be quite common. It's rare these days, but those can vary greatly from $20 to $50 a page at some places. It really depends. And as far as word count fees, we don't charge any of those for our titles. I know there are some journals out there that do because they try to keep the length within a certain range for their print titles.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the audience? If so, please type them in the chat box at this time. Okay, someone's asking, are the length requirements different for each journal?
Reference formatting can be specific to the journal. With most journals now available online and with most platforms wanting to have these references linked, there is a standard for having the DOI, because what happens is we take these manuscripts with the references and the DOI information, and it's run through a system that automatically populates those links to make them active on the online version. And so it's important for us that those are formatted precisely as directed in the author guidelines. Not all journals probably do this, but I think it's becoming more of a standard now. And having a URL, if there's no DOI available, is the other version for linking.
Thank you. Any other questions before we conclude today's presentation? Oh, here's another question. Who are the suitable persons to send the preprint to get feedback and comments?
That would be whatever your field is. You would look to that preprint server that is available online, and you would follow their submission guidelines to posting it. So for the preprint servers, basically they just post your manuscript, and then other researchers and readers that are looking at that preprint server content are the ones that will provide feedback to you. So these are people that are in the field, that are reading your research, and that want to know the most recent research. And so they're providing feedback to authors that have posted on the preprint server. And so you can take that feedback, then revise your manuscript and submit it to a journal for publication.
And then someone is asking if you have a list of predatory publishers.
No, I do not, but I know there are lists out there. There's actually a company called Cabells, C-A-B-E-L-L-S, I believe is their name, and they have a blacklist, so to speak, of predatory publishers. It's a database, I believe, that they sell. There used to be, Beall's List, which had a blacklist of OA publishers, but that's been taken down some time ago.
Thank you. Then how do you become a peer reviewer?
How do you become a peer reviewer? Was that the question?
Yes.
Generally, the editors are looking at people who have published in that field. Whatever area the manuscript is focused on, they look for people who are well-known and published in that field, and that is who they select to peer review, because they want to make sure they're getting comments back that will help refine the article, and make sure that the research is valid and appropriate for the journal.
I believe those are all the questions for today. I just want to take a moment to thank Pam Wilson again from UH Press for sharing so much information and how we can prepare to publish our research in journals. And just as a reminder, if you are interested in learning more about publishing, we have one more webinar as part of our publishing series, which will be on March 5th at 3 p.m. You can register for that the same way you registered for today's webinar. And that workshop will be on publishing beyond grad school and for professional development. So they'll also talk about things like how you can become a peer reviewer. Those are some things that will be addressed. Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Take care.